And we're back in black. We're playing Pathfinder today, and today we're gonna talk about the Ranger. The Ranger is the guy who kind of has a personal vendetta against some type of enemy. He just hates them so much. Maybe it's something in his backstory, usually is where he, maybe his village got raided by goblins or something, and now he's made this his life mission to just hunt down every goblin he finds and just kill them all. Or something like that. So the Ranger's very hateful, a very, very hateful man. But how does this then translate to game terms? How does this work in the game? And by the way, I'm going to talk, when I talk about the Rangers, this is true for all my guides. By the way, if you want to check out the other guides, then link in the description. All these guides are going to be speaking as if you're playing on unfair difficulty, but remember that anything that works on unfair also works on lower difficulties. So, the Ranger's signature ability is, of course, favored enemy. At first level, a ranger selects a creature type from the ranger favored enemy list, and then it gets a +2 bonus on weapon attack rolls and damage rolls, which is very important. If you're using a melee weapon, this is kind of the same as having +4 strength. It's almost the same, you could say, as the Barbarian's Rage. Kind of get the same bonus. It's very similar to the Alchemist's bonus that they can get, where they infuse themselves with some drug and they get +4 to 1 stat. So this is kind of what you expect to get from level 1 on one class. It's strong, but it's only strong against humans that I've selected area. You can select, of course, anything, but I would suggest that you select humans on level 1. Not to spoil anything or anything if you haven't even started the game, but there's going to be a lot of humans in the beginning and throughout the game. There's going to be a lot of humans. So in my opinion, the best favored enemy, if I were to give you a tip, would be humans. You're going to add more favored enemies when you level up, as you can see, at level 5. And for every 5 levels thereafter, the ranger may select an additional favored enemy. In addition, at such interval, the bonus against one favored enemy, including the one just selected, if so desired, increases by 2. So this is a little bit weirdly worded, but what this means essentially is that at every 5th level, you will be able to select one more favored enemy, and then you will select which one of the ones that you have already that you want to get a +2 bonus against. So you can't get the +2 bonus against everything. That would have been very, very good. But for instance, let's say I select humans on level 1, and next level, on level 5, I select beasts. Now I also get to choose, who do I get the extra +2 bonus against? Do I get it against the beasts, or do I get it against the humans? If I select humans, then I will have a +4 against the humans and a +2 against the beasts. So I hope that made it a little bit more clear, because to me it was like, how does this work exactly? How does this translate to the actual game? So that's how that works. It is a very, very strong ability, and this makes the ranger actually being probably the best class in the game to deal with one specific type of enemy. But keep in mind that it's only for that enemy. If you're up against anything else, you don't get this bonus, so it's wasted on everything else. It's very, very strong against that. Against everything else, the other classes will be better than him. The ranger, the barbarian, the monk, and the fighter will all outshine the ranger against, even in ranged attacks, against things which are not the favored enemy. But since the ranger loses out a little bit, if I would rate, by the way, I always rate these characters on a scale in combat prowess between like, for instance, the fighter is 100% combat prowess and is 0% utility, because the fighter does not gain many skill points, he does not have any utility spells that he can use or anything, so it's just combat prowess, no utility. If we take the counter example would be the Bard, which I also did a guide on, check the link in the description. The Bard is pretty much 100% utility and 0% combat prowess. The Ranger is a little bit more evenly balanced. I would say it's like 80% combat prowess, and then it's about 20% utility, because the Ranger actually gains a lot of skill points when he levels up. So you can use your Ranger as your skill monkey if you want to, and it's actually decently good at it, because even though he's a skill monkey, he can still fight. He can still fight with a ranged weapon. If you go with that, we're going to talk about that alternative when we get into how to distribute your stats, because then your stats probably are going to be a little bit different, and you probably don't need to use a composite bow as you probably would do if you're playing with a regular ranger, which is more meant to dish out damage. So the ranger gains a lot of skill points, he has favored enemy, but most importantly, if this was all that the ranger had, I would probably put him at like 50% combat prowess. This would be like 50-50, it would be a balanced class of 50-50, but the ranger has a very, very strong ability. He has an insane, like one of the biggest spikes during your progression of any character, because on level 4 he gains a hunter's bond. And this takes two forms. He can either spend a move action to grant half his favored enemy bonus against a single target of the appropriate type to all allies within 30 feet. That's one option. That's not the option I would recommend though. The option I would recommend is, the second option is to form a close bond with an animal companion. A ranger who selects an animal companion can choose one from the following list: bear, boar, giant, centipede, dog, elk, leopard, mastodon, monitor lizard, and smilodon and wolf. And you can of course do hunter's bond and animal boon companion is the feat. So if you prepare a little bit for this, as you can see, on level 1 you will get a feat. On level 3 you will get a feat. So you can on level 3 select boon companion even though you don't have a companion yet. And then on level 4 you can select hunter's bond, and then you'll have an extreme spike in effectiveness, because this hunter's companion, is like the druid animal companion, except the ranger's effective druid level is equal to his ranger level minus 3. But this, of course, as I said, is removed by boon companion. This is very, very strong at level 4, and when he gains that animal companion, he just jumps up in effectiveness, much like the mad dog from the barbarians, which is so much stronger than the regular barbarian because they gain the animal companion. The same is true for the ranger. When the ranger hits level 4 and he gets his companion, he's just so much more effective. And the animal companion also works very well, I feel like, with the ranger, because the ranger often will be ranged. Why will he often be ranged, you ask? Well, because the ranger has this thing right here, called a combat style feat. And the combat style feat, you select one on level 2, and then you will gain feats. So for instance, you can select archery and you will get archer feats. You can select two-handed weapon and you will get two-handed weapon feats. The problem with the combat style feats is that the combat style feats will be nullified if you're wearing heavier armor than medium armor, and this kind of makes the ranger more ideal for a ranged approach, because if you're going into melee, you probably want to wear heavy armor, or you want to have something like the monk, which has an armor class bonus from his wisdom or his charisma, depending on what type of monk you are. The ranger doesn't have anything like that. He doesn't have any unique abilities which makes him very tanky, like the other fighter classes have. So he's kind of... He's not... You don't have to play him as a ranger, and you can of course make him work as a two-handed. Even in Unfair, I would say, you could still make him work with a two-handed weapon or something. But then... I don't know which road you want to take then. Either you just pick up a heavy armor and you don't care about the combat style feats, just ignore them, that's one way of doing it. Or you just go with medium armor and you go more into dexterity, but then you're gonna run into problem with not having enough skill points, and we're gonna have a look at that also. So that's why I say that the ranger, while not being, while he doesn't have to play with a ranged weapon, he's kind of incentivized to do so, in my opinion. Especially on the higher difficulties. Then he also gains favored terrain. At 3rd level, a ranger may select a type of terrain. He gains +2 bonus on initiative checks, lore, nature, perception, and stealth skill checks. This doesn't seem that good, but it's actually quite good. The reason for this is... I don't want to spoil much, but... Let's just say there's a lot of forests that we're gonna be in this game. Most environments are gonna be forests. And if you select forest, then you will have a better initiative check, you will have better lore nature check, and you will have better perception check. And perception check is very, very good to have a good perception check. This guy will be your lore nature and perception check passer. I mean, if nothing else. If he's a skill monkey, which we're also gonna talk about, then he might pass other checks. But otherwise, he's there to pass your perception and lore nature checks. Whenever they arrive. The Hunter's Bond we already talked about, the animal companion. He gains evasion, much like a lot of melee classes actually gain evasion, except for the fighter, I guess. where he gets, whenever he makes a successful reflex saving throw against an attack that normally deals half damage, he takes no damage instead. He gets it quite late though, at level 9. And then he gains improved evasion, much like the other classes. Like the rogue and the barbarian, everyone pretty much gains this. And he takes no damage, and let's see here. Takes no damage on a successful reflex throw against attacks, and handful takes only half damage on failed save, which is quite good. He also gains this ability, Quarry, at level 11, where he receives a +2 insight bonus on attack roll made against his quarry. He can designate someone as his quarry, and against +2 insight bonus against that enemy, which is quite good. And then at level 20, of course, you have to have, you know, the level 20 kill something feat, which a lot of classes have. A ranger of 20th level becomes a master hunter. He can, as a standard action, make a single attack against a favored enemy at his full attack bonus. If the attack hits, the target takes damage normally and must make a fortitude save or die. Usually it's a fortitude save or die, but keep in mind, as I always say with these abilities, almost all these abilities, at least all of them that I know of, are considered to be death magic, and most enemies at higher levels are immune to death magic, so it doesn't work against them. But you can use it against weaker enemies, and you can use them against some bosses, I guess. Also, the other problem is that you're level 20 at this point, and when I topped out, if you want to see my playthrough, by the way, link in the description, I was level 16 when I completed the game, so you might not even get to Master Hunter in your playthrough. So keep that in mind when you create a build. A lot of playthroughs will probably end before level 20. I think it's quite rare to actually get to level 20 with a character. So, that's the standard range. Now we're gonna talk about the subclasses of the Ranger. First is the Freebooter, and the Freebooter, in my opinion, is kind of the weakest choice. I'm sorry to say, I don't want to you know, shit on any classes or anything. Maybe Freebooter is your favorite, but in my opinion, he is the weakest. And the reason for this is he loses out as an animal companion, which is, in my opinion, is one of the biggest reasons to go into Ranger. And the only thing he gains for this is Freebooter's Bane. At first level, the Freebooter can choose as a move action to indicate an enemy in combat and rally her allies to focus on that target. The Freebooter and her allies gain a +1 bonus on weapon attack and damage rolls, and then it increases at 5 and 15th and 20th. So this is a decent bonus. I mean, you can choose someone and then everyone gets this bonus. So if you have like a party with everyone is essentially like a fighter or a ranger or some kind of melee class, then I guess this bonus is decent. It's kind of like the bard ability in a way. But you lose out on your most important asset, which is your animal companion. Also, I forgot to mention, the Ranger is a divine caster with an insanely slow progression. But at level 4, I forgot to mention this. Not only does he gain his animal companion, he also gains some very, very useful abilities. If you're going with a ranged character, then you probably don't want to use Hurricane Bow a lot, because Hurricane Bow upgrades your bow's size. I mean, it doesn't weigh more for you to carry it, but all the hits from it counts as being one size larger. So usually this adds like 1d6 damage or something, which is quite good to have there. So then the next class here, Flame Warden. Flame Warden is, in my opinion, probably the only thing I would ever consider taking, except for the standard Ranger. The Flame Wardens also lose out on their animal companions, but instead they actually gain something valuable to replace it with. They gain the ability to cast fire elementals, which kind of makes up for not having an animal companion. They start off with a small fire elemental, and then it grows. Let's see here. Here you get the medium fire elemental, and at level 13 you get the big fire elemental. So it kind of acts as your pet in a weird way. At level 4 you also gain Touch of Flame, which makes you able to make one single weapon have the flaming special ability, and it counts as magic. It's quite good to be able to imbue a weapon like that. You gain Stoking the Embers, which is a weird ability, very weird ability. It makes you able to resurrect someone. So I think this class is kind of made to be, if you're playing this class, what I would do with this is I would probably have him as a ranged character, and I would probably have him very close to my mages, and then if someone gets hit by some weird spell or something, or if someone you know, sneaks in and attacks them and kills one of your mages or something, you can instantly resurrect them. Because yes, this can resurrect a character, but only if it died within 1 round. So it's a very, very narrow use case ability, and you need to really be on your toes to realize, okay, he died, and then just immediately resurrect them with Stoking the Embers. So this spell cures 5d8 points of damage, plus 1 point per caster level. Unlike other spells that heal damage, Breath of Life can bring recently slain creatures back to life if cast upon a creature that's died within 1 round. Yes, within 1 round. So you need to immediately cast Stoking the Embers on something. Well, it could be quite useful. Then against Burning Renewal, which in my opinion is quite similar to the Monk's ability to like remove ability drains and stuff like purify his body. This guy is purified by fire. Whenever he takes fire damage, he removes the conditions fatigued, shaken, sickened, exhausted, frightened, nauseated, and he removes 1d6 points of ability damage and 1d6 points of ability drain from the most damage scores of his choice. So the ranger overall, I should say this, that the ranger goes very, very well with either a wizard or a sorceress, someone who can cast higher level spells, both because they can buff him, of course, but also because they can buff the animal companion, and especially if you're playing with a flame warden, you want someone who can cast something like a fireball or something, or he can cast on himself also, but if you can cast on yourself just to remove ability drain damage. That's important to keep in mind. You don't have to like, you know, search out a fire-based enemy to do this. You can damage yourself, and that way you can remove ability damage, which is probably the most useful application for this ability. Then you have Phoenix Blast at level 16. If the Flame Warden dies, his body explodes in a conflagration in 20-foot spread. Each hostile creature in this area take 10d6 points of fire damage. The problem with the Phoenix Blast is that it's not super good. You don't want to die with the character, especially on Unfair. I mean, at this point you might have a high enough cleric that you can bring him back, but it's gonna cost a diamond, or you're gonna have a expensive scroll or something. So I'm not really a fan of this. I'm a more fan of the level 20th ability. When the Flame Warden gains immunity to fire once per week, the Flame Warden rises from the ashes of his own destruction 1 round after dying. So this of course works with the Phoenix Blast, so you can have your ranger die, explode on everyone, and then come back with half his HP. So it's, I don't know exactly how to utilize this. If you want to run in and die to save everyone and then come back. But it's a fun ability. It's fun that they have something like this in the game. And that's kind of what makes the Flame Warden unique. He has a lot of special abilities. I would say that a lot of them are very narrow in use case. You're probably maybe gonna use them once or twice in the game or something. But he has some go-to abilities which you're gonna go to, use again and again. One of them being the Touch of Flame, which you're probably always gonna cast on your weapon. And you're also always gonna summon your highest level elemental to have something to replace your animal companion with. Then we go to the Stormwalker. The Stormwalker is also a miss for me, in my opinion. Maybe you have found something very good about this class, but I really did not. This class also loses his animal companion, which is kind of what everyone loses, it seems like, if you're not the standard ranger. Which is horrible, of course, because the animal companion is very, very strong. If you don't know, maybe I should explain why I keep saying that the animal companion is so good. Why do you think that the animal companion is so good? Well, on unfair difficulty, it's very, very hard to stay in melee with something, because most things can crit you or even hit you sometimes for more than your HP. So there are enemies in the game which can crit you for several hundred damage, and will be more than you can ever achieve on your character, even if you buffed him up, go into dragon form, cast all the spells ever, and you have the highest constitution you could ever come up with. You can still get one shot by enemies in this game. So having something like an animal companion is very useful, because that means that when the animal companion dies, you can just sleep, and when you sleep you resurrect your animal companion, and you don't have to go through the hassle of finding a resurrect scroll and doing all that stuff that you need to do with a normal character, and it's kind of too time consuming to even do that feasibly, I think, in a normal playthrough. So that's why the animal companion is so good. If you just a small side rant there. So, the Stormwalker, much like the Flame Warden, at level 4, instead of the Flame Warden, which turns a weapon into fire, this guy turns it into electricity. It's pretty much the same ability as the Flame Warden, but for electricity. But then the problem is it doesn't gain anything. He doesn't really gain anything which replaces his animal companion at all. He doesn't gain any good spells. You see, there's nothing here really appearing. He gains evasion, which all rangers do. He gains it on the same level even. Flash Step, which makes him move across the battlefield like a bolt of lightning. As full round action, he can transform into lightning and move to any unoccupied square within 50 feet without provoking attacks of opportunity. So it's kind of like a dimensional door he gains there. And then he gets one with a storm when he's immune to electricity. Quite nice. The Flame Warden also gains immunity to fires. Keep that in mind. It's kind of the same ability. But there's more fire than there's electricity in this game. So immunity to fire is better than immunity to electricity. The two most common elements in the game are... The highest one is fire damage, and the second one is electricity. Then we have Flash Shot. When he uses Flash Step, he can make 2 range attacks after his movement. So this is quite nice. So when you use this move action, this Flash Step action, you can shoot 2 arrows, and then he retains Master Hunter, much like the regular ranger. So that's all the subclasses. It was quite a rant. There's much to talk about the ranger. It's a very complex class. He has a lot of things to do, things he's involved in. So let's have a look at how to create a ranger here. One, you can go with any race with this guy. It won't matter too much. But what I really like to pick up here is the motherless. If you go with a tiefling, for instance, you can go with an ASMR, you can go with a human. I won't say that anything is wrong or you can't complete it with anything. It's much up to you. But the reason I go for this is because they gain +2 bonus to strength and to wisdom, which are useful on this guy. We get a -2 penalty to intelligence. Also, this class this heritage is not something I would recommend if you're going with a skill monk. We're gonna talk about that also. You get a +2 racial bonus to mobility and lore nature. Yes, lore nature, which we are gonna be good at passing those checks. You gain the blur spell, which is very good because you won't gain it naturally, and also the blur spell makes you have 20% concealment, so you're even harder to hit. Even though you're probably gonna stay out of harm's way, you're probably gonna stay very far away with your bow and just blink away at enemies and have your tanks or your animal companion do the close-up action. You also get a secondary bite attack, which will be useful if you're doing something like a ranger, which is like a two-handed ranger or a weapon and shield ranger or something. That can be useful, but it won't work with ranged attacks. Unfortunately, you can't bite. You can't bite as a ranged attack. So here for favorite enemy, I will always. What is this? L? Okay. For weapon focus, I would definitely suggest that you go with a longbow. Where's the longbow? Oh, I already selected it. Weapon focus longbow gives you +1 bonus on all attack rolls. With this, it will be quite difficult for you in the beginning to hit something, but fortunately for you, you have favored enemies. So the first enemies that you're going to be up against in unfair will have armor class 22, but if you have something like 18 dexterity, you will have a +4 there. You'll have +1 for you from being a ranger, because the ranger has the same progression as fighters and barbarians and everyone. They get 1 base attack bonus per level, which make them actually able to perform attack actions in a good way on the higher difficulties. So longbow gives you +1 more bonus, so you have 6 in total, and then you get 7, 8 with favored enemies. You have a +8. It will still be difficult to hit something, even though you've been all in with all these bonuses. It will still be difficult, and that's true for all classes. It's very difficult if you're going with a non-spellcaster to complete the early game without dying or reloading. But that's just how it has to be. By the way, if you want to see a guide on how to complete the early game with a melee character, there's another link down in the description. So I was selected a longbow. Next, we're gonna select a favorite enemy, and I think that without a doubt, the best one is to select humans. The first enemies you're gonna be up against are gonna be humans, and there's gonna be a lot of humans throughout the game, so you can't go wrong with humans here. For alignment, you could select anything here, but what I would suggest is if you want to pick up 1 level monk, for instance, which synergizes very well with this class, then I would go somewhat lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, doesn't matter too much. But if you were able to pick up monk, then you can use your wisdom bonus as your to AC. Is what I'm trying to say. Wisdom bonus to AC, but then you won't be able to wear armor. So you have to think about, do I want to spend that much on wisdom or not? But we're gonna have a look at the skills here. So for the skills, this is what I would recommend if you're doing something like a ranged character. We are sacrificing constitution here. We only have 9 constitution, which is very low. Yes, even on unfair, I would say this is very, very low. But your role is to stay out of harm's way. You have your animal companion that attacks in, and you just plink away with arrows. And then you ask me, why do I need strength on a character which is a ranged character? Doesn't make any sense. Don't I only need dexterity? Well, you need strength if you want to use something like a composite weapon. Normal ranged weapons, we're gonna talk about the ranged weapons, I think, because it's a little bit complicated. If you're shooting with a bow, which is the normal case, a bow which is not a composite bow will not gain any bonuses from strength, so it will just deal the damage that it says. If it's a small bow, it will deal something like a D6, and if it's a long bow, it will deal a D8, and you will not gain your strength bonus added to that at all. But if you have a composite bow, then you will add your strength. But the bonus or the benefit from using a bow compared to using a crossbow is that the bow will have all your attacks. So for instance, when you get to level 6, you'll get 1 extra attack, albeit as a lower attack bonus. But if you play with something like a crossbow, you won't get that attack bonus, but the crossbow will have higher base damage. So it's kind of a trade-off, and you have to think, do I want to invest that much in strength, or do I more want to have something like a skill monkey build? Because if you're doing something like a skill monkey build, or if you want to have more constitution, then you can reduce your strength. You don't need that much strength then. But if you're going with a composite bow, then this is something I would recommend. You only need 14 wisdom, because the highest level spell that we'll be able to cast is a level 4 spell. That will be at level 20, I think, or level 16 or something. Probably level 16. And that spell will require 14 wisdom, so we don't ever need to have more than 14 wisdom. And we will mostly use these to buff ourselves, so it doesn't matter in overcoming any resistances or anything. So, if you're then going for a skill monkey build, what I would do then is you can reduce all your strength. You don't need to go to minus necessarily, but you probably want to have at least a few points in intelligence, because that will give you more skill points. So what I would recommend that you go for skill points, if you're doing more of a skill monkey build. This is, by the way, that I say that it's a skill monkey doesn't mean that it can't perform in combat. It's still quite strong in combat, but you will also be able to pass a couple of skill checks. So the most important ones to pick up is perception. I would say is the most important one on your ranger, because you will have a perception bonus on all your favorite terrains, which is probably going to be forests, by the way. But it's very good, because then you will be able to find more items and stuff like that. You also want to pick up lore nature, because you gain a bonus. That's another thing you gain from your favored terrain. And stealth is a good one, and then you can select pretty much anything that you need, in my opinion. I would probably go something like trickery, or maybe mobility also is a good one. If this is your main character, then you might consider picking up persuasion, and if you don't have a cleric in your party, then you probably need to use magic device on this character, because you will need to use some scrolls like restoration and greater restoration. Also keep in mind that we have a very good reflex save here, but shit, will, and fortitude save, so you will need to compensate this if you're doing something like a melee character, especially if you're then you very much need to compensate this by getting Iron Will and improved Iron Will and Fortitude and improved Greater Fortitude. This is true for Unfair, because in Unfair, if you want to play the highest level of content, you either need to stay out of combat so that nothing can hit you with spells, or, you know, be very, 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 very careful with your character, or you need to have a very good Fortitude and Will save, because in the late game, the highest level spells will be Death Magic, and those spells usually target your Fortitude and Will save, and they can kill you outright. So be careful with that. Wow, that was a long rant. Thanks so much for watching. This has been my range guide. See you next time.